Well, once again, good morning. It's great to see a full church. I think this is the day when we're always together in one way or another, especially this day through social media and cell phones. But this is the day we really get to see the full family of God's people all at one time gathered together. So it's a family day, and let's give thanks for that. Well, speaking of social media, this week as I was studying and trying to be pious and study for the Sunday sermon, I got distracted and started watching YouTube for one reason or another. And you know how there's that annoying commercial that pops up every time you open up a YouTube clip, and it says you can skip this commercial in 5 seconds. And a lot of times we're just sitting there waiting for this annoying thing to go away. Well, this commercial caught my attention, and it's called the Solo Shot. And it's a device that you mount on a camera tripod, and you clip a little sensor to your arm or something, and it's synced with a motion detector, and then you mount a camera on top of that device that goes on top of the tripod. So what this thing does is wherever that sensor is, it follows that sensor around. So you could, for example, it could be used if you were maybe a gymnast and you were by yourself and you were trying to film yourself to see if your routine is accurate and correct, or maybe if you were a pole vaulter or something like that. Maybe even a training video, if you wanted to make a training video and you had nobody there to videotape you. And that's what its purpose is, but I could easily see it for... Well, there's that scene that I go back to in Napoleon Dynamite with that guy that used to be a high school football player, and he's like 50, and he just keeps watching videos of himself over and over again because he can't ever get past that period of time in his life. So I can see it going that way. I can see lots of us, probably me included, just like watching ourselves all the time. And the thing is called the Solo Shot. Well, and it really kind of led me to the idea of we're not in this alone. We're not designed to be in this world alone. We really can't go solo on this. Now, there's a joke in the clergy circle that we often use, and it's a story about a gentleman that is shipwrecked. And he ends up on a desert island, and he swims ashore, and he's the only survivor. So he's on this desert island for about 10 years. Well, after about 10 years or so, a ship passing by sees him, and he sends up a smoke signal, and they come over and they rescue him. And so the rescue party comes ashore on the beach, and they say, "Well, sir, I see that are you the only one?" He said, "Yes." I mean, "Well, how come there's 3 buildings here, or 3 huts?" He said, "Did people pass away and die over a period of time?" "No, I'm the only one here. I've always been the only one here." And he goes, the sea captain goes, "Well, what's this first building right here?" He goes, "Oh, that's my house." He goes, "Oh, okay. Well, what's the second building?" "Oh, this second building is my chapel. This is my church." He goes, "Oh, okay. Well, what's that third building over there?" "Oh, that's the place where I used to go to church." Well, this story is about forgiveness. Easter Sunday starts on Good Friday, and this whole period of time called Holy Week is about forgiveness and reconciliation. And as we know from that joke, sometimes forgiveness can be hard. Sometimes we can't forgive ourselves, and if we can't forgive ourselves, it's even harder to forgive somebody else. Like this poor guy on the island. Evidently something happened in that other building, and he said, "Well, I'm just going to go build me another church." So, who knows? Maybe he was schizophrenic. But the work of forgiveness is hard. It's hard for all of us, and it can be. And it's especially painful for God, especially on Good Friday. Now, one of the interesting things about Easter is, like for example, if we were to go out to somebody that was not a Christian, and we were to ask them maybe, what's the most important day in the Christian year? Most people, maybe even other Christians, would say Christmas. Kind of sounds like Christian, seem to go together. But I would have to say Christmas is not the most important day, because if it wasn't for Good Friday and Easter, specifically Easter, if there was never an Easter, nobody would have paid attention to Christmas. Easter is let me put it this way, going back to your high school geometry, it's the fulcrum of our faith life. It's that point that balances all other things, and Easter is our most important thing. And at the moment of Easter, something very critical happened. a new creation was born. And that was God's first day, God's launching of a new age. And so when I say things like, Easter is forgiveness, Easter is the beginning of a new creation, Easter is the end of death and the final solution to evil. But a lot of times we look at a world, just flip on CNN or flip on Fox News, or maybe even just hear any radio station or pick up the San Angelo News, and you'll quickly think, well, it doesn't really sound like that much has changed. It doesn't really sound like evil is gone, or sin has been put away, or there's a new world, because we see things. We see drama and tragedy. We see crime going on. We see poverty. And it seems like, well, gosh, it doesn't really seem like much has changed. Well, I would have to say otherwise. And second of all, the other thing is bad news sells better, and we all know that. So we don't get the good stories all the time. But of course, that's part of our human nature. So when you say there is a new creation that has happened, it's kind of hard for us to see that. But this is something that we need to kind of work through and polish off to where we can see it. Now, I was watching, like I said, I was watching some things this week and doing some reading and studying towards this message. And I came across, y'all probably know my favorite theologian, Bishop N.T. Wright in England. And he says it like this. This new creation is something that what we call in the trade, in the field of theology, it is now but not yet. It kind of almost doesn't make sense, though. How can you be in something now but it hasn't yet happened? Well, let me explain it this way, and he goes on to talk about this. About 100 years after Jesus' death, the Roman Empire was still very powerful, and the Roman Emperor Hadrian had to put down a revolt. And there was a Jewish revolution, and it was led by a gentleman named Simon Bar Kokhba, and he was a Jewish insurrectionist. And actually, unlike some of the other cases, most of those Jewish revolts were quickly squashed by a Roman legion or two. But in this particular case, they were successful. And he became the leader of a region of Jerusalem, a region of Israel, for about 3 to 4 years. He had a following of probably maybe 500,000, and an army, an actual Jewish field army of about 150,000 men. Pretty powerful for its day. Well, the temple, as we know from Jewish history, had been destroyed about 70 years earlier than this. Well, maybe about 50 years earlier than this. It had been destroyed. Rome had come in and sacked Jerusalem and disassembled the temple and just did away with whatever they could that was part of Jewish life. And so that was just a dagger strike straight through the heart of Jerusalem. It would be as if someone came in and tore out the Constitution of the United States and burned it on live TV. It would just be something so detrimental and horrible to us. That's what destroying the temple was to Jerusalem. And so, Simon Bar Kokhba comes in, leads this revolution, and for a short period of time starts to make coins and establish a government. And it was the hope that this government would be the one to finally, once and for all, push the Romans out. And they did something really significant. They were living in that period of time where what I described as the now, but not quite yet. And they did something, and this is just a small, I don't know if y'all can see this, I tried to make it big enough. This is a picture of the coins that this Jewish government that lived for about 3 to 4 years made and minted. And this coin right here, you might be hard to tell, but these are some pillars right here and a door. This is a coin of the temple. And over here, these writings in Hebrew say year 1 of the new temple to come. And it's interesting because this was their goal. This was their mission statement. This day and age, we call it a mission statement or a vision statement. They were going to live into the reality that it was time for the new temple to come. Now, as we know, there still is not yet a new Jewish temple that hasn't been built yet. But they believed something. They were starting a new life, launching a new initiative. they were ready to live into. It wasn't a false promise because they were minting coins, they had a government, they had a strong field army. They were going to live into the reality of building the temple back and reestablishing the Jewish state. And that's just a small thing about what Jesus is trying to say here and what was going on and what was active and what was real in his 3-year ministry, his 3-year active public ministry. That this new world that he was launching, this new message, this new way of being human was indeed real. And it was something that was tangible, that he was talking about, and that we can still see the fruits of today. Now, God in Jesus Christ came to offer a better way through this message. He was launching something new. Change had occurred, and change still is occurring, even though Fox and CNN might try to tell us otherwise. Well, my undergraduate degree is in history, and that's kind of my thing. I love history, all kinds and levels and parts of history. And in going back and looking at history, in my mind when I question and say, well, have we really changed that much? Well, yes, we have. The change that was brought about is the momentum and force of that is still moving forward. For example, most people today think eye for an eye is a means of retaliation. But for its day and age, it was a revolutionary way of bringing about peace. Heard an alarm go off. Okay. I thought, did I leave a cake in the oven? An eye for an eye. Okay, take this back to tribal warfare. Ancient tribal warfare, where if you come over and take one of my donkeys, I'm going to go over and devastate every single thing that you've ever had. If you come over and harm one of my cousins, I'm going to go to your tribe and kill every single last one of you. That was an uneven way of justice. But an eye for an eye meant you were only allowed, if someone hurts your eye, you were only allowed their eye. If someone takes your donkey, you are only allowed to take their donkey as retribution. It limited retaliation. So often we think that's something, really bad, but actually that moves forward to today. Because if something happens to you, you are only allowed to take what is equal to that other person, not every single thing. So yes, things have gotten better. In the ancient world, if you were born outside of a station of wealth or royalty, you couldn't get anywhere. You were stuck in that level. But in this new world, which has been gradually gaining momentum and change and evolving, this day somebody could be born and have a minimum wage $5.50 job and work their way through college, get a degree, move on to a career, maybe even become an apprentice businessman and become a CEO of a company, or run for public office and be a respected leader, or become a very wise teacher in a university, or whatever. Because 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 3,000 years ago, that never would have been possible. So yes, change is occurring, and change still happens. And yes, this is part of the world that God started. But this started with forgiveness. Good Friday is one of the smallest attended services in the entire Christian year. And perhaps maybe it's because it's a horrible reminder that our sin put Jesus on that cross. But that day is the initiation of forgiveness. That day is the beginning of God's forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is an interesting thing because it's a two-way swinging door. Forgiveness is something that can come out of your heart, and it's also the same way that something goes into your heart. So, forgiveness lets something in, and you can also let something out. Remember that survivor on the island? His door had been locked and bolted shut to whatever had made him mad at that first church that he built. And he had gotten so upset with whatever that was in there that he decided to build something new and didn't forgive, even himself. Well, real pain and real hurt can be addressed at forgiveness. Real pain and real hurt need to be named, put in its place, and effectively dealt with. Now, this wouldn't be an Easter Sunday if I didn't quote the Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to John Wayne. Correct? In She Wore Yellow Ribbon, John Wayne has that classic scene where he says, "Never apologize, it's a sign of weakness." How many of y'all remember that? It's one of my favorite movies. But I would have to say, John Wayne left the other half of that off. Never apologize. It shouldn't just be never apologize, it's a sign of weakness. It should be don't just apologize, because that's the real sign of weakness. Because when you just say you're sorry, it's just halfway there to forgiveness. When you say you're sorry and go the rest of the way and say, what can I do to repair the damage that I've done to this problem or this relationship? It's part of naming it, putting it in its place and effectively dealing with it. Well, if Jesus had just said, I'm sorry, y'all messed up, and never rose on Easter Sunday, it would have only been halfway. Easter is the completion of that. Because forgiveness is not complete until it's fully brings someone back together. Forgiveness opens doors, and the absence of that is revenge or retaliation, closes doors. But that new door opens to new possibilities. When I was in my youth, my 20-something, I remember one period of time where I was a young police officer, and we were showing up to some incident or some scene, and there was a bunch of kids coming and going from a dorm room, and they were probably doing something highly inappropriate in there. And another officer from another agency showed up, and he kind of told me what to do. And in my 22-year-old self, I popped off and said, well, you can't tell me how to do my job. And then we did the 20-year-old thing that guys do. We squared off on each other. And then it got really quiet as we quickly realized everybody was staring at us. Everybody had come out of the dorm room, and everybody was looking at these two police officers from two different agencies staring at each other like roosters. Well, quickly, we had to do something to repair this relationship. And so I whispered over to him and I said, what are we going to do? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, how about we just kind of back off and go away? And he goes, sounds good to me. Well, a little bit later, maybe after the evening had calmed down, I called the sheriff and I said, I need to tell you I did something really ridiculous and I need to apologize. And about that same time, he was on the phone calling my chief and saying, you know, I need to tell you that Chris and I got into something and I think it was my fault. Both our chiefs and our sheriff's call said, you two just need to go have coffee together. And we did. And things were different. That level of drama, or that level of anxiety took the edge off. And I'd have to say there was never a traffic stop that he wasn't at that I did, and there was never one that he did that I wasn't at. And had we just let our egos get in the way, it would have gone horribly different. There would have been a horrible rift and division between just not he and I, but between two agencies. And probably even something could have even worse come about that. But forgiveness, naming something and dealing with it, just as Christ did on the cross, opens a door for new possibilities. And I dare say that there is something like that in every single one of our lives, where we need to name it. Then we need to effectively deal with it. And that will open a way of life and new creation. And as the church, we need to remember that forgiveness is an amazingly powerful thing. It's not a weakness. Forgiveness creates new space for that new world. All humanity is called to remind the world that forgiveness is powerful and transformative. And all of us are invited to continue in that building project that Jesus launched. And when we do, we can help bring about a world of faithfulness, forgiveness, peace, and love. Amen.